Alright guys, B'siyata Dishmaya, we're here in Shari Yichud, continuing our learning in the Hilchot of Birkot HaShachar, the morning blessings. We are up to the blessing of Hanoten L'Sechvi Vina. He who, well, we'll see what it means. Let's not translate it. Hanoten L'Sechvi Vina. The pshat of this blessing is, he gives, what's it in English? He gives the rooster the power to differentiate between day and night, something along those lines. Right, so let's see what the halacha says. It is difficult to translate the words of this blessing. Who gives understanding to sechvi? We know that it's about giving understanding. Anoten bina, right? But what is a sechvi? What is sechvi? This word sechvi. It is based on the verse from Eov, Job 38:36, that uses these very words. Rashi's there offered two interpretations. One is that sechvi means the heart, or the consciousness, the raw intelligence that enables us to tell the difference between day and night. Right? We're blessing God, thank you for giving my heart, or my consciousness, the ability to differentiate between the nighttime and the daytime. Since roosters share this intelligence, this intellectual feature, and we benefit from the fact that they notify us of the approaching daytime through their loud crowing, the blessing was instituted to be recited upon the hearing of the crow of a rooster. Right? So it came together. There is one dialect in Arabic that sechvi means rooster. So there is a way that you could say also back in the ancient times that it had the same meaning. Right? The Arba Turim, the Beit Yosef, the Levush, and the Mishnah Berurah explain the simple interpretation of the blessing to be a praise of God, of God's gifts of our basic intelligence. So you have a ton of poskim, very, very heavy-weighted poskim that all come together and say, here we're mainly talking about ourselves and our own intelligence. And the Arizal cited in Shara Kavanot, the gate of intentions, the Arizal explained the blessing in Kabbalistic terms. The term sechvi refers to gvura. Gvura, right? The attribute of judgment that reigns during the night. Gever is also another word for a rooster, a gever, right? Which could also be man, could also mean a man, right? But we also call it a gever, and that's why a gever, it's part of the kavanot of kafarot when we do the atonements before Yom Kippur with a gever, with a tarnagolet, with the chicken. Part of the kavanah there is gever. So the Arizal says sechvi refers to gvura, which is the attribute that rules over the night. After midnight, though, after chatzot, not 12:00, the halachic chatzot, whatever it is, between 11:30 to 1:20, 1:30, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. After midnight, halachic midnight, the sphere of bina shines onto that gvura and mitigates it. The first half of the night is called lail, or leil, whereas the second half of the night is called laila, with that added hay. Right, because it receives from bina, and that's the first hay of Yud Kei Vav Kei is bina, so that illuminates onto the gvura, and then you get from leil, which is lamed Yud lamed, which is not a feminine word. Once you add bina into it, it gets a laila, and it becomes a laila. Therefore, this blessing can be recited at any time after midnight. So that's what the Ben Ish Chai says, which today is the Lula, and here we have a mention of the Ben Ish Chai, Baruch Hashem. In some Ashkenazic communities, the text used for this blessing is Asher Natan LaSechvi Vina, who granted understanding to Sechvi. All Sephardi communities use the text of Hanoten LaSechvi Vina, who grants understanding to Sechvi. Who granted understanding to Sechvi, who grants understanding to Sechvi, right? Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon, he wrote on the text, Asher Natan, since the verse in Eov also uses the word Natan, gave, in the past tense. Kaf HaChaim of Chaim Palachi, he argued that all of our blessings should be in the present tense, right? Hanoten, Noten HaTorah, Noten L'Sechvi. It's all in the present. The Yafeh Lalev, he added, according to Kabbalah, we must use the present tense in the blessings. In this blessing. Indeed, Rambam and Rabbeinu ben Abu Daram and the Shulchan Aruch all cited the text Hanoten, in the present. He gives now. The Orchot Chaim brought both of them. Next halachot. Blind or deaf people. Even blind people are obligated to recite the blessing of Anoten Esech Vivina. Although all the poskim concurred with this ruling, according to some poskim, a deaf person may not recite this blessing since he is incapable of hearing the rooster's crow, a deaf person. Others ruled that it does not matter whether the individual can hear it, since the morning blessings were instituted to thank God for the general nature of the world. Therefore, even someone who is deaf can recite this blessing, and this is the accepted ruling. Blind people. If a blind person insists on reciting the blessing, now we're up to the blessing of Pokeach Ivrim. We have a bracha, Bochat Hashem, Pokeach Ivrim, who opens the eyes of the blind, right? Who gives sight to the blind. We are here thanking Hashem for the chesed that He's bringing down, that the eyes of people, right, that we're able to, even if their eyes are open, people cannot make conscious use of what they see. When you're sleeping, right, even if your eyes were to open up, you're not conscious of what you're seeing. So we give a bracha to Hashem, thank you, that when I wake up in the morning, you give sight to the blind. Thank God for the renewed ability to see, because my eyes were there at night, and all of our eyes opened during our sleep, and we can't see. So technically, our sight is renewed in the morning, and for that, you opened up the sight of the blind. You gave sight to the blind. Who are the blind? Not blind people. All of us that we can see normally, and when we were sleeping, our eyes didn't work for whatever reason. Suma, a blind person that wants to make this bracha, he insists, I want to make Pokeach Ivrim, who gives sight to the blind. We should not protest it, right? If you see a blind person saying this bracha, you give sight to the blind, don't tell him off, don't tell him not to. There's a sound basis to permit him to recite the blessing. If a blind person asks a rabbi whether he should recite the blessing, however, the rabbi should instruct him to refrain from reciting it. If he asks the question, you tell him the proper halacha is from Safek Birkot La'akel. When there's a doubt, we go lenient, meaning we don't say a blessing in a case of a doubt. And since we're not sure what exactly this blessing was instituted for, is it for blind people, is it for people that could see, but at nighttime they couldn't see, so there's a doubt whether he's obligated to say it or not. The general rule in halacha is if there's a doubt whether to say a blessing or not, you don't say it. So if he says it, we don't tell him off, and we don't tell him to stop. But if he asks a rabbi, the rabbi has to teach him halacha. He has to tell him the true halacha, and then he would be obligated to tell him, please don't say it because of the ruling of Safek Birkot La'akel. Mishi Yitchil Levarech Bochat Hashem. Someone, he wanted to start a blessing, he said Bochat Hashem, and he wanted to say the blessing of Pokeach Ivrim. Okay, he's up to Pokeach Ivrim. He says Bochat Hashem, Bochat Hashem, Pokeach Ivrim, but he then became confused and ended the blessing with the words Matir Asurim. He releases the bound. He may no longer recite the blessing of Pokeach Ivrim. He may not repeat the blessing of Matir Asurim either. Right? So he started in his head, he wants to say Pokeach Ivrim. He says Bochat Hashem, Matir Asurim. He says the next blessing. He cannot go back and make Pokeach Ivrim again, and he can't redo the Matir Asurim. If someone recited the words Bochat Hashem while intending to recite a specific blessing, and then he realized that he is not yet up to this blessing, he may not switch to recite the ending of the one he is up to, or any other blessing. Instead, he must continue and complete the blessing he had in mind when reciting the opening words. According to the Rambam, if someone recited the words Bochat Hashem while intending to continue with Pokeach Ivrim, then even if he ends the blessing with the words Matir Asurim, he has fulfilled the obligation for Pokeach Ivrim. and not his obligation for Matir Asurim. The majority of Rishonim, however, ruled exactly the opposite. He has fulfilled his obligation for Matir Asurim, because that's what he said, and not that of Pokeach Ivrim, which he didn't say. The Shulchan Aruch cites the Rambam's opinion as the halacha, and then mentions that there is a dissenting opinion. The Mishnah Berurah, however, ruled in practice to follow this dissenting opinion. In practice, we follow the principle of Safek Brachot La'akel. Again, this, when you're in doubt, be lenient. And we do not repeat Pokeach Ivrim or recite Matir Asurim in such a case. The Mishnah Berurah ruled that if someone intended to recite a blessing of Pokeach Ivrim, but in the end the words Malbish Arumim escaped his mouth, as long as he corrected himself within 1 second, he has fulfilled his obligation of reciting the blessing Pokeach Ivrim. Meaning he intended to say Pokeach Ivrim. He says Malbish Arumim, and immediately he says Pokeach Ivrim. This opinion is the opinion of many Achronim, but the Shari Tshuva and the Degul B'Ravava remained unconvinced that this is true. Therefore, hold on. No, that's it. That's it. Next, the bracha of Matir Asurim. So wait, just to wrap that up. You come, you intend to make Pokeach Ivrim, and you say Matir Asurim. You say the next blessing by accident. You do not repeat the first blessing, and you do not repeat the one that you actually did, even though you didn't intend to do it. Matir Asurim, the blessing of releasing of the bound. We're giving praise to Hashem and the fact that I can stretch out my bones, stretch out my limbs. Right? Why? My hands and all of my limbs when I was asleep, I had no conscious control over them. And our sages equated this state to that of a person being bound in chains, a person that's in prison. After waking up and finding out that we're able to move our limbs again, it's as if we have been released from all of those bonds, from all of the prisons that we were in. This is the explanation of the Levush based on the Talmud in Birkot 60b. And then we have Zokef Kefufim. With this blessing, we're thanking Hashem for giving us the strength to stand up and the sense of balance, enabling us to remain standing without falling. Zokef Kefufim. The literal translation is who straightens who makes the bent over upright, or straightens the, like a kafuf is a person that's bent over, and zokef is to be erect, right? To be straight up. Even someone who is paralyzed and cannot get out of his bed on his own must still recite this blessing. The morning blessings were instituted to thank God for the general manner in which people were created. This is the ruling of the Ben Ish Chai. Today is the Ben Ish Chai's day. This was his ruling, cited in the Kaf HaChaim. This conforms with his ruling regarding a blind person reciting the blessing of Pokeach Ivrim. And his ruling that even if someone is barefoot, such as a mourner during Shiva, he may recite the blessing of Sha'asali Kol Tzoki. And he made for me all of my needs. Right? He doesn't wear shoes because he's mourning, or he's barefoot, or he can still do it. According to Rav Ovadia, however, it is best that a blind person refrain from reciting the blessings of Pokeach Ivrim, like we just said. If so, perhaps the same should apply to a paralyzed person regarding Zokef Kefufim. This needs to be verified, says the Hilchot Yosef. Right? So we don't know the situation. I don't get it. It makes way more sense to me the path of the Arizal and the Ben Ish Chai. Again, I'm no one to get into it. I'm just saying as part of this learning. I don't understand Rav Ovadia. If for the Arizal and for a lot of the poskim and for the Ben Ish Chai, we make these blessings as the way of the world. We're blessing the way of the world. So why wouldn't the blind person say it? Because they have to go through it. The Shulchan Aruch said not. So Rav Ovadia for sure was trying to follow Shulchan Aruch, whereas the Arizal and the Ben Ish Chai were saying, no, there's a Kabbalistic thing here of just saying thanks to Hashem for this. This is how the world goes. And there's people that see. The people that can see are helping me as I'm blind. So I'm saying thank you to Hashem for the way of the world, because those people that with sight can help me as a blind person. So I don't know. This is again just me personally. I'm definitely not getting into the disagreements. Next halacha: if someone mistakenly recited the blessing of Zokef Kefufim, right, being upright, before reciting Matir Asurim, he may no longer recite the blessing of Matir Asurim. By thanking God for the ability to stand up, he has already thanked God for the ability to move his limbs. Right? Being able to stand upright includes in it being released from your bonds of sleep. In such a situation, he should try to see someone else who still needs to say this blessing and ask him to have him in mind for the blessing and to say it on his behalf as well. If that's not feasible, he should recite the blessing for himself while thinking of God's name without pronouncing it, like we spoke about before. Right? You say Baruch, you think about Hashem, Ata, Hashem, and then you say Matir Asurim. Ben Ish Chai, Baruch Hashem, coming up non-stop on his day. The Ben Ish Chai recommended pausing to think of God's name while reciting the blessing in this case, without pronouncing the name, so that one would fulfill the obligation of the blessing, at least according to the poskim who ruled that one can fulfill the requirement of any prayer by thinking it. There's poskim that say, tefillah, prayer, thanks to Hashem, you don't have to say it out loud, even thinking it is okay. There are poskim that say that. There's other poskim that say no, it has to be an action, it has to be speech involved. Speech is already an action. But Ishchai is saying, you stop. There's opinions that say you can be Yotzei. You just missed the blessing. You're not going to have that blessing on your account today. Instead of missing it completely, do what those opinions that say you can trust on, you say Baruch, you think about Hashem's name in your head, and you continue saying the blessing, and now you did it. They bring here in the Yalkut Tosef, a better solution would be for this person to find someone else who needs to recite the blessing and ask him to recite it on his behalf as well. In that way, he would fulfill his obligation according to all of the poskim. Regarding other situations, this is exactly what the Ben Ish Chai recommended. Perhaps he did not offer this suggestion in this case, since it is not a practical solution regarding the morning blessings, because the custom is to recite the blessings in one's home. Right? So if you're going to be at your house, not everybody's going to be at your house. That's at least how it is in Sephardi communities. Right? Thank God in Tzfat we have this ability, right? Because we all pray mixed up together, and in nearly every Sephardi shul there's Ashkenazim that say their blessings in the synagogue, and vice versa. So, Malbish Arumim. Oh no, sorry, we're still not done. If someone began to recite the blessing of Zokef Kefufim, standing upright, but while in the middle of the reciting of the after saying Baruch Atah Hashem, he realized that he had not yet recited Matir Asurim, he must not switch over to the blessing that he skipped. Instead, he must continue to complete the blessing of Zokef Kefufim, even though this means that he will not be able to recite the blessing of Matir Asurim at all. This was the ruling of the Or L'Tzion, concurring with the ruling of the Chayei Adam cited in the Ben Ish Chai. And the Ben Ish Chai disagreed, arguing that it is better to change this blessing to Matir Asurim and recite that of Zokef Kefufim afterwards. Why? Again, because he believes that you should be saying all of your blessings. And right now, if you say Baruch Atah Hashem, if you still can change it within a second, like we saw from the Mishnah Berurah before, so then change it and say the right blessing. Don't finish it when you are already conscious that you're on the wrong path. Fix it immediately and say the blessing. Whoever goes by the Ben Ish Chai, there you go. Do one more bracha. Malbish Arumim, the gift of clothing. This blessing, who clothes the naked. Malbish is to clothe. Arumim are naked people. Was instituted to thank God for the gift of clothing to protect our dignity and to protect our bodies from exposure to the elements. According to some authorities, the correct text is Hamalbish, but the accepted custom is to say Malbish. The correct pronunciation of the word Arumim with the dagesh in the letter Mem, although most prayer books spell the word as Arumim without the dagesh. Whenever you have a dot in the middle of a letter, that's not a double letter, it's an extra emphasis. So like Mem, for example. Mem, there's not like Bet and Vet, or Shin and Sin, or Taf and Saf, if you're Ashkenaz. If you have a dagesh inside of a Mem, that means that you're meant to emphasize that letter. So Arumim, that first Mem has to be emphasized. That's part of the Hebrew language. The word arumim, pronounced without a dagesh, means crafty people. An entirely different meaning, meaning people that know how to trick around, right? People that are crafty in the sense of not an arts and craft, but in crafty and like a fox crafty, right? That's Ben Adam Arum. But, so to say also, like Adam and Eve, right? There's two ways you could play that word, because on one side it says there, it's also wisdom, craftiness. You have how did you know to cover up yourself? How did you know to do that? Oh, you're naked? Naked is one thing, but they were also covered themselves with the fig leaves. Where did you get that knowledge from? Where did you get so crafty, right? So that's the same word, but when we're making the blessing in the morning, we have to make an emphasis to not say arumim, rather to say arumim, to put an emphasis on that first mem. Yeah, he brings it here in the footnote. V'yushnehem arumim. The two Adam and Eve were naked, is the proof to this spelling. In contrast, we have in Job again, v'tivchar lashon arumim. Choose the language of the crafty. So in Job, it's talking about craftiness. In Adam and Eve, it's talking about nakedness. But there are, for sure, I've seen it, chachamim that take the part of Adam and Eve and flip it on the side of wisdom. And now that they ate from the tree, they became more crafty, became more enlightened. Right? And that was their nakedness. And that is it for today. Bezat Hashem. Next time we continue, we'll be continuing from Hanoten Le'ya'ef Koach. He who gives power to the sleepy, to the people that have been working hard, the people that just need a break. Because Baruch Hu continues to provide for us. Bezat Hashem Yitbarach. Thank you guys for listening. Like, subscribe, comment, share.